was the first thing I found.
Welcome to TSRW. This shit really works. Karen and I love to talk about how this shit really works. And one of Karen's favorite topics is prosperity and calling out your good, because that's something that we can do. So I know you love to talk about this. So let's talk about calling out your good.
Yeah, what I loved is that when I first found out about how this shit really works is that there's this power for good in the universe, and I can actually use it. And it's everywhere present, and it's always available, and it's within me. And I know that for me and for a lot of people, the tendency is when somebody asks, what do you want? I know what I don't want. Mm-hmm. And the human brain, maybe it's just our brains and how they're wired, but the human brain tends to go to what we don't want, and we focus on what we don't want or what we're lacking, right, or what we don't have. And instead of, I want that, or I want to call that out, I want to claim it, I want to name it, so that as I claim it and name it, I actually experience it in my life.
I learned that learning how to ride a motorcycle. When I first learned how to ride a motorcycle, they would say, don't look at the pothole, because if you look at the pothole, you will drive right into it. And I tell you, I did not believe them. And so we went out on the parking lot, and we had to go driving around. We had to go ride around the, all the medians, and we had to, because we were outside of the, little school, and now we were out there. And sure enough, they picked a parking lot with a pothole. What did I do? I looked right at that damn pothole, and I drove right through it. Because what you focus on is absolutely where you go, right?
Right, I learned that. That's a great thing. I learned that in playing sports when I was younger. Softball player, where I wanted to throw the ball is where I had to look. Right. If I did not look at that glove or that person or that base or wherever I was throwing that ball, if I took my eye off of that for just even a flash, I threw that ball wild. Right. But if I looked exactly at what it is that I wanted to hit, I hit that spot every single time.
So why is it that we look at what we don't want?
That's a great question.
What is so fascinating about what we worry about, what we don't want, why we, I think, wouldn't it be great if you could just obsess about your good?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that what we're talking about? Calling out your good. You actually obsess about it. You get focused on it. You talk about it. You set your intention around it. You're totally engaged in it. I mean, I used to think that worry was somehow like the tax I had to pay for things to work well. And that, right? And that somehow by focusing on what was not good, I would be like, well, honest to God, let me just tell you, I used to think that if I really focused on the good stuff, I would jinx it.
Interesting.
And that when I focused on the negative, I was preparing myself,
for something to happen?
Well, yes. And I was not being overly naive, and I was being prepared and protecting myself. And I don't know about you, but I mean, for me, it's always been a lot easier to think about what I don't want. Mm-hmm. And so to really do the work, the discipline to think about what I do want, well, first of all, I had to know what that was.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? And then I had to not be afraid to stare it down, to really go for it in my own mind and my intention, and to get over this whole weird idea that I was somehow jinxing it because I was paying attention to it. And that if I didn't worry about it, I wasn't taking it seriously. I mean, isn't that what you do when you take something really seriously? You worry about it. That just gives you an ulcer. So, having been there and done that,
you decide not to do that anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I love that we can call out our good. Recently, I had an unexpected blessing, an unexpected pleasure when I broke my ankle, as you know, on vacation. And it sucked. However, there it was. And then it was like, okay, well, so how can I move through this moment, still enjoy the vacation, make the most of it? And then when I got home, found out it was broken, not just sprained, but broken in 2 places. And so when I met the surgeon, what I love, the reason why I picked that surgeon is he said, well, one, you really need surgery because you're active and to get back up on your feet. But he said, I will treat you like my best friend, and I promise you, I will do a great job So you get completely back up on your feet. And that's the type of person I want. He called out my good for me. And I said, yes, that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I focused on that he was able to do that. I didn't think about whether he was capable or not. I said, the surgery is going to go perfect. It's going to get in alignment. I'm going to get back up on my feet as much as possible. I focused on allowing the titanium to be accepted in my body and that everything surrounding it. I did that work. I called out like I am getting back to my full capacity in less time than expected. And when some people said, well, you may not get back to 100% full range of motion, I said, that's not my reality. That's not what's going to happen. And I used every step of that, like call out the good. My ankle's getting stronger. My ankle's getting more flexible. Going to physical therapy. He said, look how much you've increased. And I kept focusing on the little bit of increased strength, increased mobility, increased flexibility. Look at that. And by the way, I called out my good by looking at the non-broken ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that as like my mental equivalent, my what equals what I want. And I focused on that the whole time. I'd wiggle my left foot, my left ankle and say, that, see that right ankle? That's where we are. And so now they're both doing this and they're happy and I'm strong and I'm back and going to spin class and all that. And the surgeon said, you're like my poster child. We can't just know what we want and then sit on the couch like we're doing. We have to do both. We have to call out the good, know what we want, and do that over and over and over again and focus on that and also participate in that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that over and over and over again is really important, right? It's not just something that we do when we meditate or when we read a, inspirational book. It's actually even more important when it's maybe looks like it's not happening or not working. Or it's something when it's a little more challenging, right? Because you can call out your good in everything. You talked about your health. You talked about your healing of your bone in your body. We can talk about it in terms of prosperity or relationship or getting better at doing something or bringing in new ideas. There's all kinds of ways that we can talk about that same calling out your good. And for me, the other thing I notice is that, well, I'm just a little impatient, right? So I call it my good. I do a few affirmations. I spend a little time on it. And then it's like, okay.
Where is it?
Yeah. And then it doesn't show up. And I'm like, well, and then I make up stories about it. We don't have to go into all the stories that can be made up about it, about, I wasn't supposed to have it, or I didn't do it right, or I don't deserve it, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And part of the calling out, I think, is that discipline, that long-term intentionality. Because I think when you talk about calling out your good, one of the things that speaks to for me is moving beyond just having to manifest individual things, right? But really calling good out of life itself, generating something that's really powerful and meaningful in life itself. And if I'm calling out good, like a whole new career or a whole new creative endeavor, or, I decide I want to travel all over the world, sell all my stuff, or I want to, get a PhD, or some of these things do actually take time in the space-time continuum, and we're out picturing them in the space-time continuum. It's not just always instantaneous, and that idea that I'm continually calling out my good, right? And I loved what you said, incrementally, like see each piece as it's coming. Sometimes it's just an awareness on my part. Oh, I'm calling out my good. And all of a sudden I'm aware of a thought I have or a way I'm holding myself back. Well, that's not a bad thing. I can see that, and then I can do some work around it and keep calling out my good, right? It kind of mines all of that up and out. But I really loved what you said about incremental, that like, it's not just the big good. It's then, oh, look, here's a piece towards it, and notice. And because I think sometimes, because I'm impatient, if I if I don't have the end result right off the bat, I'm like, well, whatever, this doesn't really work. But I can show myself that it's working along the way.
Prove to yourself that it's
Right.
working along the way.
Right.
And as we notice it and we acknowledge it, that actually continues to ensure that that good keeps coming and it keeps
Right.
growing and it keeps actualizing.
Yeah.
You know, one can do that in, like you said, in all areas and aspects of our life. And we can do it not only in the big things, we can do it for that. You know, I call it, you know what I love to do? I like to play. Have you ever been like you have to be somewhere at a certain time? Like when we have to speak somewhere or we have to show up, right? And I remember one time I was doing something for a really big function, and I was the first person that was going to speak, and it was downtown Dallas, and I got on the tollway and it was red all the way down, and it was estimating that I was going to arrive 11 minutes after the thing started. And I had to call out my good big time there. And I just started calling out my good. And I said, you know what? Time expands. The wave of traffic just opens up. I don't need to know how it happens. I'm just going to be there on time. All I know is I'm there 4 minutes before the event starts. 4 minutes before the event starts, and I saw the ETA arrival time on the GPS. It just started ticking down, and because I was seeing it tick down, I kept saying, see, more of that, and I kept calling it out. And they were calling me. I was in the elevator. Are you here yet? I'm like, I'm just a few floors away, and I arrived 4 minutes before the event went off. But initially, it was like I was going to be way late.
Right.
And so we can do it in the big things. We can do it in the now, call it out right now. When things happen and we don't think, you know, someone says, well, that's not going to happen. Well, you can start calling out your good and say, yes, it is.
Yeah, I like to play too. I always get Rockstar parking. Unless I don't care about it. And if I don't care about it, then I'm happy to walk. But when I really need it, I always get Rockstar parking, right? And so those are the ways, sure, those are fun, silly little ways that we can show ourselves that we're calling out our good. And the other thing that I notice is that when I'm calling out my good, I'm not activating my anxiety or intention, or my anxiety or tension. Right? Because I know when I'm late, I can get really worked up. And boy, do I tell myself a story about, and then I get tense and I get angry and I get frustrated, and the whole thing just goes down the tubes. And then even should I at that point be even remotely on time, just a little bit late, I'm still not in the shape to do whatever it is I'm supposed to do, right? And so the whole idea that we're calling out our good also focuses us on that good result. And I find that there's a complete release of tension. I'm not anxious about it anymore. I'm not really forcing something. I think that that's an important piece when I'm really working on that. I'm not trying to make something happen, which, just feels like another tension, right? It's like what? I'm becoming a magnetic consciousness, right? To call out the good. I'm becoming a magnetic consciousness for that good. And so I don't have to be tense. I don't have to be anxious about it.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we think about this topic, call out our good, and this shit really works, we need to work it. So you got some ideas for today, like one or two things for people to do. How do they work it on call out your good?
Well, we've said a couple things. One, you have to know what you want.
Okay, know what you want.
Know what you want. And you have to be able to articulate that in some way that you can focus on it. So that's 2. 3, you have to actually see the incremental pieces.
So see it along the steps along the way.
See the steps.
And acknowledge it and celebrate it.
Yeah,
yes.
And celebrate it. And not just, well, but I'm not there yet. Right? Oh, that was good, but I'm not there yet. Well, you just undercut it, right? It's like, wow, this is getting better. Yeah, this is working. Yeah, this is, see that. And that came up and I'm letting it go. Right. So I think that's really important, acknowledging and celebrating the incremental pieces.
great point, because again, back to the ankle, when, if I looked at, I'm not full capacity yet, it went down again.
Mm-hmm.
But if I look how stronger I am than I was when I showed up here 3 days ago at physical therapy,
Right.
I was stronger the next time because I was calling that out.
Right.
Great.
And I think we really move into that place of, do we trust that we're working with a larger set of understanding about the way the nature of reality? And am I willing to put it to the test? Am I willing to say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to actually see that it works? And I know that you've called out your good in selling your house in California, and, sold it for way more than your real estate agents originally said it was going to sell for. I have certainly called out my good by calling in amazing staff here at CSL Dallas and with you. And there's so many different ways. And I think the other piece of it is that calling out your good doesn't have to, we don't have to be really afraid to use it for anything.
Right.
I think that's an important piece. You can use it for something that is quote unquote materialistic, but you can just as easily use it for calling out your good, for having a deeper experience of connection. And really saying, no, I'm going to have an experience of connection. I am calling out my experience of peace or centeredness or whatever that is. And that there's really no topic that it isn't valuable to think about. And where this practice doesn't actually work. Because I think ultimately what we're doing is we are engaging in that universal law that says what you put out, you get back.
Spiritual law, that universal spiritual law.
So you put it out and you get it back. Mm-hmm. But you can't just put it out once. So I think the other practical thing I would underscore is, working this shit is not for the faint of heart. It's just not. You know what? It's like going to the gym. Oh my God. You have to actually do the reps. You have to actually sweat. You have to actually, every once in a while, you actually have to, you're a little sore afterwards. And I think that we are, we're not always so excited about doing that kind of disciplined work. And if you got to work it, what do they say in the 12-step program? It only works if you work it.
Right.
And so this shit really works, but it requires us to work it.
Right.
And
every single day, in as many moments as we can. And also the other thing is not only for our individual life, but also in that collective, like you said, when you said, well, you can do it for like peace and things. Well, we can call out our good for the things that we want for humanity. Yeah. I think that's something that is so significantly important. And again, back to human nature, maybe it's our brain. I don't know what it is, but we tend to, certainly we fed it a lot by media, but we tend to only look at the negative stuff.
Well, sure.
And so we've got to call out the good for the greater, yet to be, for the collective consciousness, for humanity, for a world that works for all. And continue to call out that good and start looking for those incremental wins. Yeah.
What's the good that's really happening? Well, we know why our brain does that. We have a reptilian brain, and its job is to keep us safe. So it's constantly scanning. It's scanning for safety, security, safety, security, safety to security, right? And it's focused on everything that doesn't give us what we perceive as safety and security. That's its job. And so our reptilian brain calls out that which it perceives as a threat. So we are designed to look for the negativity. We're designed to look for the thing that is threatening us when we are operating our lives in survival mode. When we are unconscious and in survival mode, that's what's driving us, which is why becoming conscious and becoming aware and using our spiritual practices and bringing our tools to bear, right, allows us to raise out of that where we can actually call in something different, right, which is that which we want, as opposed to where's the threat, where's the threat, where's the threat. Well, you look for a threat long enough,
you'll find it.
And you'll call in all those things that we're afraid of.
Yeah, so you're bringing up a great point, Peter, in that we can create a new design and shift that reptilian brain and create a new design by calling out and looking for and speaking in and seeing our good.
Yeah. So when you're out on Facebook and when you're out on the news, call out the good and then praise it, every bit of good, incremental good that you see.
Awesome. Well, so everybody get busy, call out your good. And we know this shit really works. So start working it. And we look forward to doing this again.
Yeah. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Thanks.